Hi everyone, and welcome to a special edition of the ECS Ask Me Anything series. My name is Ali Hill, and I'm a delivery consultant at ECS, and I'm going to be hosting the session this afternoon. So today, I'm delighted to host another partner special, and this time with continuous delivery and integration specialist CloudBees. So from CloudBees, we're going to be joined by Senior Solutions Architect Phil and Director of Professional Services in EMEA, Martin. And we've also got from ECS fellow delivery consultant Ritchie. So before I hand over to the panelists to introduce themselves, I'd just like to remind you that you can ask questions throughout this session by using the chat box just below this video window. We're going to be monitoring the questions as they come in, and we'll do our best to put your questions to the panel throughout the session. If we don't get to your question, then please leave a comment on the recording and we'll get back to you. And after this brief introduction, we'll dive right into about 40 minutes of questions and answers. So you can ask questions throughout if anything that the panel is talking about or discussing prompts an idea for something that you would like to ask. So let's start with introducing the panel. Phil, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Yeah, thanks, Ali. Phil Cherry, so Solutions Architect. I've been with CloudBees for about 2 years and 4 months, based in the south of England, near to Maidenhead. Spent most of my career in and around automation. So for those who know the names, I've worked at places like Nolio, Atomic, and if you go really far back, Mercury Interactive doing test automation. So happy to be here.
Perfect. Yep. Thank you very much, Phil. And what about yourself, Martin?
Hi, Ali. Thanks. So my name is Martin Roxby. I'm the Regional Services Director for Professional Services for our EMEA and APAC region. So I've been with CloudBees just over, I think, 2.5 years now. So I run a team of consultants who help our clients with adoption of our products, and working with partners as well on that. And I do say adoption very deliberately. It's not about technical installation. It's about making sure our clients are successful with the product. So it's all of the things that they need to change in order to adopt this to get value. So we create services for them and try and get them to that point of getting real value from their investment in the tooling.
Yeah, that sounds great. And what about yourself, Ritchie?
Thanks, Ali. Yeah, I'm Ritchie Moore. I'm one of the delivery consultants for ECS. I've been working at ECS for about 2.5 years now. Prior to that, I've been in sort of operations and DevOps for about 10 years. And yeah, I've been lucky enough to be doing some partner work with CloudBees for about the last year and a bit, probably since about time COVID hit, actually, which was good.
Oh, yeah, hopefully unrelated. But yeah, as you can see, we've got a really knowledgeable panel when it comes to the CloudBees platform and implementing solutions. So I'm actually really looking forward to learning more about CloudBees and the platform myself throughout this session. So let's start off by, I'm going to put this question to Martin and Phil. Why might people know CloudBees? Can you give us some background on the work that you do and who you work with and maybe some of your offerings?
Yeah, sure. So I guess we're most well known for our association with the Jenkins project. So Jenkins, very successful open source project, got a large community of people that not only contribute to it, but that work with it. I think it's the #1 automation server out there. So highly successful. But at CloudBees as an organization, we are very closely aligned with that. It isn't a community-driven project, but we have engineers that work for us, but that contribute code into that totally for free, just open source contributions. And I think a lot of people still see CloudBees and Jenkins as very closely associated, but the reality is that we do a lot more than just that. For the last few years, what we focused on is helping organizations who want to take that Jenkins project and use it at a more kind of enterprise level. If you think about how Jenkins is used, it's kind of a viral solution, right? So developers download it, maybe they've used it somewhere else before, download it, put some plugins on, get it to do their build. And then other people see what they're doing, oh, that's great, I'll do the same thing. It starts to grow. But what you find is when the usage of that grows, you run into one of two problems typically. Either everyone's been trying to jump on the same Jenkins server, and then you get scalability issues. Physically, you can't vertically scale a server too far. You run out of RAM and CPU capability. Or the other one is that you start having what we call islands of Jenkins, lots of disconnected Jenkins servers out there, all doing their own thing with no kind of common standards, no central way of looking at anything. So what CloudBees has been focusing on is effectively enterprise Jenkins, we call it CloudBees CI, but it's taking Jenkins and running it in an enterprise way. So having the ability to centrally manage all of those disconnected islands of Jenkins, provide central policies and central management, set up approaches to how we use plugins, what plugins are okay, which ones are not. So a lot of things around solving challenges around efficiency and governance, really, around those Jenkins servers.
Yeah, and just in terms of from a services perspective, the sort of thing that we come across is very typically what Phil describes there. And what we're trying to do is solve for that change from these ways of working with the product to good practices for using Jenkins. It's still Jenkins, so people still have a base understanding of it. But it does, I think the two things we focus on are non-functional requirements, so making sure that it's scalable, available, supportable, and secure, and has all of those enterprise characteristics that you really can't build in by just doing it at a sort of team-based level. So we look at making sure that they can deliver those non-functionals that enterprises really require. And the other thing is working with it in a good way, so good practices for using it. So people may have been working with open source Jenkins for many years. They might do freestyle jobs. They might, use plugins in a particular way. They've all got the ways of working. But actually, at an enterprise level, that can introduce risk. It can introduce inefficiencies. So, and they often don't know better ways of working. They kind of know what they've come up with and how they've engineered things. And they've got things to work, but it's starting to not be very good at a scalable level. And most enterprises want sort of common ways of working, so they know not just what people are doing, but you need to onboard new development teams. Well, rather than work out the specific way they need to work, well, this is the way that we're going to work with pipelines. So we're really keen to make sure that we provide really strong guidance on plugins, on using pipelines, shared libraries, and all of that makes the platform a better enterprise fit. Still Jenkins under the cover, so a lot of, people don't find it really difficult to make the change necessarily, but they still need to work out different ways of working or better ways of working to get the real value. And that's a lot of what we do in services. Installation's not the issue, it's non-functional requirements, can we deliver to those and design for those, and good practices, can we really get people getting real value out of it by working the best way they can with the platform.
I suppose that the fact that it is similar is really helpful for teams that are moving to that enterprise offering, and that's kind of key for that. Yeah,
and with many organizations that change from working with open source to working with our CloudBees CI, it's not really a big challenge. They're not having to learn new technology, but they just need to adapt the way that they work with it to get best value of it. So yeah.
Cool. Thank you both. So sticking with Martin and Phil just now, back in 2019, CloudBees acquired a series of businesses and expanded roots in the Jenkins community. And at the same time, it was spoken about that you wanted to simplify the CloudBees portfolio by focusing on integration. Do you think, has this been achieved? What sort of moves has there been in that area?
Yeah, so I guess first let's summarize what changes we made and what acquisitions we made. So I guess the first important one was a company called Electric Cloud. So if you think about what happens after you do your CI, right? You build an artifact, perhaps you even deploy it with Jenkins, but there's that set of activities. There is a greater need to look at something called release orchestration, which is a kind of different discipline and brings in a lot more elements in terms of managing stakeholders across an organization, managing how a release behaves and what kind of gates and controls you put in place when you're trying to promote changes towards production. Starting to analyze things like what environments you've got, what's installed in them right now, what's the release calendar look like. There's a lot of other disciplines that are required to do proper release orchestration. And that's something that isn't kind of natively part of Jenkins. And that's why I went for the Electric Cloud organization. It brought in that release orchestration with also a powerful deployment engine as well inside there. Then the one after that we did was a company called Rollout, and they were specialists in what we call feature flag management. So if you've not heard of this before, it's sort of modern development approach of embedding your changes or even embedding any kind of functionality behind a flag in your code. And what this allows you to do is separate that release of code from the release of that functionality, the release of the features. So now you can release your code with all the switches turned off, if you like, which is then a totally de-risked release because nothing's behaving differently to before. And then you can start flipping switches on instantly. And in production, you get things actually coming to life. And then if there's any problem, rollback is as simple as flip and switch off. So it's a very, very agile, very sort of modern approach to doing things. And the other thing that's great about Rollout is that you don't just have to turn on the flag for everybody. You can turn it on for specific audiences. Perhaps you've got certain people that are your beta testers. Let's switch it on for them first. And if it works well, then we'll start to expand it out. So that kind of very granular control, it fits nicely with the whole concept of CI, CD, release orchestration, and now feature flags sitting across there. And then the move we made after that, as you quite rightly said, was about integration. It's how do we bring these things together in a way that is easy to consume, but brings all of the power out? And this is what we now refer to as software delivery automation. So we actually have an offering referred to as CloudBees SDA, software delivery automation, which is the combination of CI, CD, and if you wanted, the feature flag aspects as well. And these have very tight integrations. So even if you're using Jenkins to build, that information is readily accessible in the CI, in the CD aspect of it, including analytics and insights and lots of great things that we're doing to really make use of the reporting engine in the CD component, but get that data out of CI. The whole idea being that SDA, software delivery automation, becomes your kind of software delivery backbone. It's the bit that allows you to drive everything that's happening, all the tools that people use, get everything going on its journey to production in as efficient manner as possible. But we've sort of held on to this concept of embrace, not replace. So we're not trying to tell you to go and use a specific source code repository or a specific security scanning tool or testing tool or whatever else. That's entirely up to each developer, and perhaps even between different teams there are differences. But you can still have the common backbone across the top and then the common visibility into what's happening across all those different releases.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, and again, just sort of from a, so that's a sort of product thing, and this is where services become really important though, because if clients really want to really orchestrate that whole, from idea to production code thing, there are a lot of people involved in that process. When we're working in the CI space, it was very much your development community with developer tools. Once you start looking broader than that, and you're looking at code into production, well, then you've got all of your service management people, you've got your security people, controls people, testers. So it starts cutting across a lot of more concerns. And it is, again, about orchestrating the process, making it easier for people to work on that. Release management, if you worked with any regulated large enterprise, is a really tough thing to solve. And lots of the time it's slowed down, lots of manual process and inspection, because the process isn't built for speed, it's built to limit risk. And most of our clients are now at the point where they can't elevate the risk, but they also can't slow down. The only real way you can do this is start to provide sort of built-in sort of automation to allow you to have the speed, but also all of the control you need over how releases are doing. And also, I talk about release. It's not just about deployment. Often we talk to people saying, oh, well, we can do deployments. That's a part of this. And, with our product, as Phil says, we can deploy with our product, or we can integrate into another deployment tool. The process, the difficult piece is not the deployment piece. It's the coordination of lots of change happening at the same time with dependencies and sequences that need to be managed. That's what keeps release managers up all night, and that's what have these horrible releases over a weekend that goes horrible on a Monday. That's what they're trying to solve, and that's where the real value is. So from a services perspective, there's definitely more that we need to do because there are more stakeholders and it's a more difficult problem to solve. But the benefit from solving that problem is enormous for clients. We're not talking, sort of small digit benefits. It's a considerable benefit that they're going to get to, the whole business, being able to get code into production securely and in a sort of predictable process is really high value. So people will invest the time and the money to do that right. And again, it's process, not just the tooling. It's not just about let's install the tools and we're done. It's very much understanding how to get their processes orchestrated and optimize the process. The other thing that we can do, which I quite like, is obviously if you try and change the process as you orchestrate it, that can really slow you down. But we can actually model out and orchestrate current process and then start optimizing the bits that are going to give the most benefit. So you can get the process all working and then start working through, can we remove this manual process? Yes, we can. So you don't have to solve everything to get any benefit. You can start getting early benefit and then do this sort of continual service improvement piece. And that's what we try and drive from a services perspective, is get clients really on that path to full scale adoption, but getting early value by showing how this works.
I think that, so to pick up on that last point is really important, because as an industry, we talk a lot about CD, right, continuous delivery, and in all honesty, it's still an aspiration for most organizations. Most people I talk to, that's where they want to get to, but it's a long journey to get there. So, the ability to help those organizations now, as Martin said, still automate everything we can, but include manual activity in that orchestration, but even do the handoff to that efficiently. So we automate as much as we can and immediately assign a piece of work to someone and they get alerted, you now need to do this. And as soon as it's done, ticket done, right, now we're back into the automation, now we do these bits. That's still huge value. And then with the insights, you understand the impact of those manual aspects and you look for the biggest problems to solve first. And that helps you on your journey towards doing it in a more continuous way. The more we automate, the closer you get to that end goal.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are making the decision to invest in the sort of CloudBees proposition. A lot of it's on that insights bit, getting insights into how well you're doing, where the bottlenecks are, is really difficult when you've got lots of manual process and lots of disparate ways of trying to achieve the same outcome by lines of business or application type. So that insights bit is really good. And because we're an orchestrator, we can extract information from wherever it lies, but present it back in a way that's understandable to stakeholders. So yeah, we're really excited about it. Always interesting projects to work on.
Yeah, I think a lot of what both Martin and Phil said there is, I see, there's a lot of relevance there from working on client projects. So yeah, and no, it does sound really exciting. It's like the CloudBees offering is the scaffolding or the backbone, this thing that kind of supports the entire delivery effort, essentially. I was actually going to come on to ask Ritchie a question now. So obviously, Ritchie, you're a hands-on delivery consultant. What is it that you enjoy about working with the CloudBees offerings?
Yeah, so myself, I come from like a sysadmin background, and my main job when I go in there initially is to actually set up the environment, and I just love how easy they are to actually get up and running in the first place. Like I've worked in places where they're either deploying it on-prem, in the cloud, on virtual machines or Kubernetes, or potentially hybrid situations, and it's just so easy to actually follow the documentation and get it up and running quite quickly, which is why I mainly use it when I'm off-site as well, when we're doing internal projects and stuff like that. It's just easy to nice and easy to actually set up and get running straight away. And in terms of CloudBees CI, when I'm actually doing migrations from the open source Jenkins onto the CI platform, there's literally minimal, if any, disruption to the actual end user. They just notice a nice shiny new interface when they log in, and then they've got all the extra benefits that CloudBees supply, like the assurance program, pipeline templates, shared agents and things. Yeah, and because no two customers are the same, eventually you do run into issues. You know, sometimes their environments are super complex. And I know CloudBees are always there and always got an open dialogue with CloudBees and the account managers and the technical support. So anytime we do hit an issue, they're just in touch straight away and proposing solutions for us with workarounds.
Yeah, and that's good to hear, Ritchie. And I think we've talked a bit about products and what we do on the product side, but I think there's definitely something I want to emphasize here is around support. And, you know, we rely on our partners. You know, I've got a professional services team, but our partners are often the people who are out there doing those long-term interactions with our products, with clients. And so we really need to make sure that they're supported. So we support our clients, but also and our partners. But I really want a big shout out to our support teams. Our technical support teams get really good feedback. So you might think, you know, our product does a certain thing, but the reason you work with CloudBees is not just the product, it's what you get around that as well. Our support team, it's not a help desk that just sort of has a call script and you ring in and they go through it and can't help. They're proper engineers. These are the people who are contributing code. So they really understand what the product does under the covers, and they understand the typical challenges that clients could hit and try to get that applied in their environment. So we get really good feedback. So, you know, those people who move from open source to CloudBees CI get the benefit of getting access to those support teams, as well as obviously, you know, our partners as well.
And just to add, from an ECS perspective, whenever we go into a client site, part of our job is to actually make sure that the internal team can actually take over when we leave, and they understand the tools and, you know, can take it forward. And you guys offer the training portal as well, didn't you? Which I've used a few times as well to, you know, brush up on things. But that is always a big thing with customers, because they're quite, some of them, you know, they've even used the CloudBees products before, and, you know, they're scared once we leave that they're not going to know how to take it over. So it's always nice for them to have that portal.
Yeah, so exactly. So access to training, so we make that available. And I've talked about support. Now, obviously support is you've hit a problem. I also want to talk about customer success as well. So, you know, our clients, if they buy the subscription, they get a customer success manager. So that is a, you know, and, you know, whether they're working with you or directly with us, you know, that customer success manager is, as it describes, they're someone who's dedicated to understanding the success plan for that client. So are they moving forward? Are they getting the right level of adoption? You know, are they surfacing any sort of requests for enhancement, getting those back to engineering? So again, you know, particularly on the CI side, people say, well, we've got OSS, why would we go with the product? The comparison is not just at the product level, it's also support, customer success, and the other things that most enterprises need to make progress. And the other thing is not just making progress, it's the speed at which you can do it. You know, give people the software, they'll probably work it out over a period of time. But when they get support from services, our support team, customer success, our partners, well, they can get to the point they need to get to a lot quicker. And that's hugely valuable, you know, from a return on investment perspective. There's no point in spending 18 months trying to figure something out by yourself when you can bring some people in who know what they're doing and get it done in a fraction of that time.
Yeah, I think that's key as well. And it sounds like there's a lot of good support both on the partner side for us and also on the customer side. We've had a question in from YouTube. It's about a specific feature within the platform, and I was asking about what advice would you give to groups using pipeline as code? Would you recommend that using pipeline as code? And I'll leave this open because obviously, Ritchie, you can maybe talk about it from a consultancy and from a consultant perspective, or maybe Phil and Martin, you talk a bit about that feature as well. I'll just leave that question open.
Yeah, I guess I'll start. So we're talking about the Jenkins pipeline as code capability. Yeah, I mean, generally, the thing about Jenkins is it's extremely flexible, obviously, but there is this idea of the best practice way of doing things. And the more modern pipeline approach is definitely what we consider the better way of doing things. It's easier to structure what's going on. It's got efficiencies in the way it's processed by the system as well. And the fact that you can store everything as code in a Git repo and just hook up Jenkins and read that code in and process things, it makes it very agile and flexible. So as a sort of high-level generic answer, I would say yes, it is something we would recommend. There are always nuances and details we need to dig into, but it is the more modern approach compared to freestyle jobs as well. It's kind of the next iteration, improved way of doing things in a way that you can just learn some basic syntax around a YAML format, and you can describe your pipeline with stages in there and activities that you're going to do, which also makes it easier to understand as it's processing, because you can see the breakdown by stages and how long it's going to take and things like that.
Yeah, I think one of the benefits that I've seen as well is that you can do, obviously, you can have change control because it's in a repository. You can have change control. You can have your pull request, your peer review, and also it gives you a historic view of what has changed in your pipeline. When something has changed, it's not maybe something that's done through the UI. It's done through a change, so you can view that history. So that's one of the things that I see as the advantage of pipeline as code as well.
Yeah, agreed.
Cool. Hopefully that answers the question, John. So I'm going to move on to ask a question about the ECS and CloudBees partnership and what that looks like. So what benefits does this partnership bring to both parties? And I'll start with maybe asking Martin and Phil.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll pick that up because, I mean, ECS are, a services partner. So, they support the business that we're trying to do in professional services. As I said, that adoption story for clients, it's not just technical implementation, it's real adoption. So we've worked for ECS for many years. I don't know how long the partnership goes back, but probably one of the longest services partners. And ECS has done a great deal for us. So they pick up work at scale that we can't do as a software vendor. We're not trying to grow our services business. We need good partners. We can provide good advice and support for partners and deliver engagements, but we really need partners to do particularly larger sort of transformational things that a lot of our clients need. So that's really good. And the other thing that ECS brings is, okay, they know our products and know it well, but you've got expertise in other areas that are really relevant. So I might say, for instance, credential management is often something we come across when we're trying to work with clients, improving their overall SDLC. Well, we don't have credential management expertise. We kind of understand it, but it's great to have a partner who can just fill in the gaps with proper experts in areas that the client needs a support on, but it's not really sort of domain expertise to us. So that's good. And the other thing that ECS has done for us, hopefully continues to do, is support us on training. So, the held training events that are sort of DevOps World type events. So, again, these are things that, we're not in the business really of scaling that type of thing, and good partners who've got real credibility in that space really help us. And also, we've got Slack integration, so we can respond really quickly. So when we do hit problems, we can easily sort of respond to those and work quite closely together with ECS.
That sounds great. What about on your side, Ritchie? Have you got any use cases or any maybe customer engagements that you've been on that you can talk about where you've used CloudBees offerings to solve problems for customers?
Yeah, I've got a couple actually, but so the first one, I worked in a large financial institution with a team whose job was to manage the actual development tools across the business. And they were suffering from the Jenkins sprawl problem, which Phil was alluding to earlier. They just had something like 15 to 20 open source Jenkins instances scattered across the business, some which they've provisioned, some which were provisioned by other teams. And they just had no way of, they had zero visibility and just no way of keeping track of any of them. The developers had just given themselves full admin permissions, installed a load of questionable plugins just to test things. And in the end, the team that were actually supposed to manage the Jenkins instances, their support tickets were just getting out of control. And because they are heavily regulated financial business, they've got to adhere to strict compliance and governance, which is becoming a bit of an uphill battle. So we were tasked with going in and installing an operations center and migrate a certain number of Jenkins instances over to client masters and connect them up. And that was basically the start of the journey for them, because once we connected those client masters up and we'd done the migration for all the for those existing open source Jenkins, I remember there being some concern from the people from the other teams who, you know, they had full control over their Jenkins. They were quite worried that they were going to lose that control and it was going to restrict what kind of work they've done. But once we actually got those two in place, you know, it's not kind of taking away anything from them. It's just, it was the main team's job to actually maintain those instances, so developers can actually just sit there and focus on, you know, the work that they actually want to work on and actually develop software. Yeah, I remember them being a bit concerned at the time, the main team, because their authorization strategy was every time that someone created a new folder or a job in Jenkins, they'd have to create two folders, one prod, one non-prod, and they had to create AD groups individually, and these were going into thousands of AD groups that they was having to manage and, you know, give people permissions, remove permissions, and that was like a massive part of their job. And they just definitely didn't want that ported over, so we had to like kind of assure them not to worry. We can use the RBAC plugin that CloudBees supply and the Folders Plus plugin to actually, you know, make their life much easier. And yeah, one of my colleagues actually checked back after we'd left, and they were actually onboarding more teams. So once they actually showed the rest of the business what they could do, like more teams were interested in signing up and getting their Jenkins migrated over.
I don't know if there's anything you want to follow up on that, Phil or Martin, with Ritchie's use case there.
I mean, it's obviously a pretty classical story, especially around the fear that people get of taking on something like this, because the fear is it's going to be totally locked down and restricted and they can't do anything. That's obviously not the goal of what we're trying to do. But also in terms of the product and what it's capable of doing, you quite rightly said, we have this ability to really flexibly allow controls or permissions to different teams. Because you may even say, across my organization, most teams are going to fit into a particular kind of box, right? They look like this, they should have these plugins and these kind of permissions, great. But I also have a cutting edge team over here that I need to really open it up, let them have whatever plugins they want, but now in a controlled space, just on their Jenkins controller. So if anything does go wrong, it doesn't affect anybody else, but you know, they will have more access. And in that way, we don't restrict things. It becomes more about the company policy and how we're going to do things. The other thing I was going to, I don't know that example, whether that was a CloudBees CI kind of on modern platform, or if it was more of a traditional one. But this idea of traditional, yeah. So this idea of getting teams to adopt, if you go with CloudBees CI on modern, which means it runs on a Kubernetes platform, the ability to provision new controllers becomes a matter of clicking a button, filling in the name, and off it goes, right? It spins up new pods with a new instance in it. We use config as code to go and reload or preload that with whatever settings and plugins you want. And then that activity, which in some organizations I see take days or even weeks to get everything done and approved and get a VM provisioned and get the software installed, and that becomes minutes. And now that kind of agility leads straightly into productivity time, right? You can now be developing and building and testing and making things work instead of waiting for another controller. So that's one of the great things about if you can run this on a sort of modern platform.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds great. Richard, do you have another use case that you like to?
Yeah, this is
discuss?
the current client I'm actually working for. They're using a mixture of both CloudBees CI and CD-RO. So they've basically paid for some third-party software which they use in their AWS environment, but they didn't really have a good way of deploying it, which means they're forced to rely on the company who actually provide the code base and their custom-built deployment software, which kind of charges per deployment, which was fine for a while. It kind of, you know, fit for purpose. But once they started expanding and reaching out to further regions and need to do more and more deployments, the costs just kind of skyrocket. So they kind of needed a tool that was capable of deploying to many different environments in a repeatable, kind of predictable way. So we're actually using CI to package up and publish the packages over to Nexus. And then we have CD responsible for the actual deployment aspect. And because all of the microservices, they can actually be deployed in the same way using the same process, it was easy in CD to actually just package, put all the processes into a master component and just reuse that across all of the microservices. And then we can just pass in different input variables and stuff where we need to. Yeah, the environments we was concerned about initially, as we had something like 5 to 6 dev environments. They're all pretty dynamic, spinning up and down on AWS. But yeah, when we actually created the applications, we ended up creating a couple of applications because we had smaller dev environments than we did in production and like many more servers, and that to try and keep costs down. We actually mapped those, we mapped resource pools over to the application tiers. And when servers actually spin up and down, they add themselves to the resource pools. And when they spin down, they remove themselves. So it just kind of takes away any of that maintenance, I guess. So we can keep all of our environments dynamic. And then because of the templates functionality, we could just create new environments as and when we like. But yeah, I feel like we're just kind of scratching the surface with CD at the moment. But yeah, it's going well.
Yeah, I got to pick up on that charging per deployment. I mean, that's a classic counterintuitive approach, right? Mm. Let's find a way to make it more expensive to actually do more work. I mean, yeah, if there's anything that's kind of anti-continuous in what we're trying to do, then that's a good one. But yeah, apart from that, yeah, it sounds like another good use case. As you say, one of the strengths about actually both or all of our products in this software delivery automation capability is the fact that you can do a lot of things as code. You can do things in kind of templated ways and make it all very dynamic. And as you say, environments spin up and they register themselves and all kind of hangs together. That flexibility makes it very powerful.
Yes, it's so easy now to actually just deploy to, you know, it's just a drop-down box, different environments, and yeah, then you've got the good logs and the visibility of during the deployment as well, which is quite easy, nice and easy to drill down when you have got problems.
I have to say, Ritchie, that sounds like a really interesting project that you're on.
It's actually really good, yeah. I love it.
Cool. If I got time for one more question, I was just going to ask. I think either Martin or Phil, you mentioned the feature management and feature toggle functionality within the CloudBees. I'm not sure if, or was it CD? Sorry, I'm not sure if you want to expand on that and talk a little bit more about that and how that helps teams.
Yeah, sure, happy to. So it's not in either the other aspects of it. It's kind of its own products. It's another acquisition we made, the company called Rollout. But yeah, it's kind of a trend we've been seeing for a while now, and a lot of organizations do this kind of without even realizing. The developers quite often will put in little bits of kind of if statements and flags in their code, but perhaps they will manage those with just variable values inside the code, or if they've got more sophisticated, maybe putting some config file in a repo somewhere that, you know, gets checked by the code so they can control flags there. But that's exactly the idea, even though they've done it in a sort of homegrown way. And what we've done is taken that up to, again, I guess more enterprise level, having more of a visible dashboard where you can see a list of all the flags in your code and the breakdown by environments on which ones are switched on, which ones are switched off. Kind of exposing that and allowing even people outside development who are authorized to manage those flags, so it doesn't become another drain on developers' time. Oh, please, can you go and turn on this flag? No, I'm trying to fix this bug over here. None of that. It's now anyone who has the permission can go to the dashboard and control that flag with instant effect happening in that environment. And as I say, then the ability to target that change, because maybe you don't change it and turn it on for everyone, but maybe certain people should be accessed, or even, because I talked about beta testers and broad users earlier, could even be you have certain flags that are country specific or customer specific or something else, and they're always going to be just on or off for different people. But that ability to target the functionality, again, makes it extremely valuable. You don't have to build different versions of your software for different audiences now. It's one build with different flags in there that are audience based.
That sounds really interesting. So I don't think I've come across like a dashboard for feature deployments or feature toggles in that way before. I've always known it as being handled by code. So that's definitely something I'll need to explore.
Yeah, one of our customers referred to it as the control panel for the UI, which I thought was a nice little expression.
Yeah. I suppose, yeah, so throughout this conversation, we've spoken a lot about sort of enterprise clients, enterprise teams, and heavily regulated environments. So I don't know if you can talk a bit about how the CloudBees platform supports companies who do work in a strong governance or controls environment, or if you've got any examples of the stuff that can kind of help companies in that environment.
Yeah, sure. Martin's probably got some very good, more specific examples. But if I talk about the general side of it, whenever you get these more kind of strict environments, it becomes more important to be able to really see what has happened and have that good audit trail of, you know, what steps did we take, what decisions did we make, and even answer questions like, well, why did that change make it into production? We need a very clear understanding of what it got there, because it went through these stages first, these kind of environments. I did these tests, I got these results, it was signed off by this person, that person. You know, I have conformed to all of the company requirements, and also any external requirements are all being kind of properly matched. And if you're not careful, it's easy to bypass some of those checks, right? If the environment's set up wrong, if people have the wrong kind of access, you can get situations where someone says, not through any malicious intent, but just they're under pressure, or they don't even think about certain steps needing to be required. So changes do make it into production a little too easily sometimes. So the idea here is that we can define that route that changes have to make with these gates that control when you can press forward, and dynamically understand, right, in this stage here, I took this change, I deployed it to this environment, I ran this set of tests, I got these results. And automatically, I can even have a rule that says, as long as I see results above 75% success, then I can progress. And if not, then I need to stop and do something else. So we've got that idea of really deciding when to progress, and also the full clear audit trails of what's happening. You know, those are important aspects in that kind of environment.
Yeah, and that's exactly, you know, the challenge that most of our clients are trying to solve. Certainly regulated, you know, financial services industry very typically need to be able to demonstrate audit, and to go in and do retrospective inspection and try and find out bits of information and try and build that story is very, very difficult, time consuming, and also high risk, because there could be missing data or whatever that means that you cannot establish what's been done. So it's definitely something that we're seeing a lot of, but I think this is going to be the same for all industries that are developing software. It's such a risk, you know, even if it's not a regulatory requirement, if you are putting software into production and you hit a problem or an issue, it's such a risk to your brand, or, you know, your business potentially. You can't really live with that risk. So building a way of sort of mitigating that and providing control, I think is what all clients that are developing software need. It's driven obviously by regulated ones because they don't have a reason not to do it. But I think it's common capabilities that any proper enterprise would want to have to be mature. Because controls is definitely one piece, but it's that speed and predictability that Ritchie spoke about as well. Is they need to know that they start down this path, it will complete, and they will get a good result at the end of it. And it's not something that organically happens. It's something you really have to sort of design and manage and implement.
It's about making all levels of the organization feel comfortable with what's being changed and what sort of evidence there is that these controls are in place as well. Yeah, no, that sounds great. So just to bring the session to a close now, I'm just going to, I believe there's an event coming up in September, is that right? That you want to talk about, either Martin or Phil?
Yeah, look, I'll mention it. We've got a couple of events. If you want to learn more and see more, we're on the 14th of May now. There is an event next week, the DevOps Enterprise Summit. So we've got a virtual booth there. Do turn up and see us there. AWS Summit in June. I don't know, Phil, if you're going to be there, but if you want to see product demos, and again, we've got a virtual booth there. if you're at that summit, come and see us, come talk to us. Big event for us though is DevOps World, which is 28th and 30th of September. There's a call for papers end of this month. If you want to submit a session, go on the site now and submit. But that's a great event for us. We had 24,000 registrations for last year for a virtual event. It's virtual again this year, but it's a really good event. We did the translation to virtual really well. So please, yeah, go on the website, look at our DevOps World event, 28th, 30th of September. See you there.
Perfect. That sounds great. 24,000 is an impressive number as well. Yeah. So unfortunately, that's the end of the Ask Me Anything session today between ECS and CloudBees. But I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned more about the partnership and some of the CloudBees offerings. So as Martin mentioned, there's DevOps World starts on the 20th of September this year. I put the link to that in the description for this video. So make sure you check that out. But thank you very much to Phil, Martin, and Ritchie for joining us in this conversation today. And thank you very much to everyone who has joined us live, and also to those of you who are watching the recording back. We hope you enjoy the rest of your day and have a good weekend. Thank you
very much.
Thanks all.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.